Your turn to speak will be after I've finished speaking. If you need to use the comment field to take notes, just don't hit enter until the video's over and you've written all that you have to say. This video is mostly for my fellow white Americans. I rarely address y'all directly, but I am one of you, so I figure I should probably speak to you more directly because I think a lot of you see yourself in me. You look at me as a white American and you think that's relatable to me. I understand a white American's perspective, and I often don't understand a white American's perspective. That's a more difficult perspective for me to understand usually than a black American's perspective or an Asian American's perspective or even just a Japanese person's perspective, like an average Japanese person's perspective. I can often understand better than the average white American's perspective. I'm gonna break down why that is, but later on. Mostly what this video is about is why white guilt is correct. Why I, as a white person, feel guilty. Not about being a white person. I don't feel guilty about being white. I can't do anything about that. I feel guilty about what white people have done and how much I have contributed to changing it or acknowledging it. Like, I feel like the more I understand how bad white people really are, the more I feel like I have to do something to stop it. Like, I, as a white person, have the responsibility to make white people suck less. I have to pump the brakes on this runaway train of white shittiness. Like, we need the guilt. Like, we keep making fun of white guilt. Like, white people make fun of one another for expressing white guilt because they don't want to feel the guilt. But guilt is a great motivator. Guilt gets stuff done. Guilt helps you address problems. If you're worried about racial tension in the United States, start by feeling guilty about it. Figure out, what did you do wrong? Figure that out first. And then we'll work from there. So I'm going to tell you some of the things white people have done wrong. Some of the reasons that I feel a shared sense of responsibility towards righting those wrongs. And also why, when I am president, I will institute reparations for all descendants of slaves from the United States. That's, I guess, all I'd really have control over. But I will make sure descendants of slaves get reparations in the United States. And like substantial reparations, and not just monetary, but we'll get into that. Mostly monetary, though. That's what people really care about. I don't feel a lot of allegiance towards white Americans because I was sort of cut off from that lineage in a way that I didn't really understand growing up. I just kind of didn't even realize that like a lineage was something that other people had or cared about, that like people knew things about their past, people had heritage. Like, I grew up with an understanding of who is my mom's mom, not really, and like who are my mom's sisters. Not really much beyond that. And most of them are not people I really liked very much once I had met them, and spent a lot of time around them. So frankly, I didn't feel a strong connection to my family growing up. And when I learned finally about the history of the family, not just from anecdotes from my mom, but because eventually my dad's mom, who I did meet a few times in my late teens, and that's the best I knew her really. She had studied genealogy of our whole family, just trying to figure out where we all descended from, and she told me a lot about it. And basically, both sides of my family have descendants that came over on like the first fucking boats to America. Like, literally the first European settlers, well, not like the Norwegian ones to Greenland or whatever, but like the first English settlements that came to the United States in the 1600s. Like, before it was, I shouldn't have said the United States, before it was the United States, the first English colonizers, the ones who showed up and killed all the natives. So like, for that to be possible, you have to understand these people showed up, killed a bunch of people, and then most of them died like immediately. You know, in those early winters, most of those colonizers died. So whoever lived through that and managed to actually produce offspring, like that's my genetic line. And I see that, you know, both sides of my family have some quite, my mom's side in particular, some very long-lived people. So I see the power in the genes there of these were like this people who really stuck through these fucking winters, you know. But like they did that by way of taking it from people who just had been there, who had taken it from no one, you know, like they just showed up at the land. I mean, granted, I don't know that much about the history of all of the ways that the natives changed, you know, cultures over the tens of thousands of years that people had been living in these lands, but it was mostly nomadic tribes who did not like hang around in a spot, you know, like there's not, what history has been revealed does not reveal like any kind of civilization that was built here, because this isn't really a great place to have a civilization. And that's a topic for a whole other time. But like we're really working with what we got here in the United States. Like this was someone's bad idea a long time ago that someone tried to make better by saying, well, okay, like we shouldn't be here, but at the very least we could try to build an ideological framework for a nation that just works better than what has ever been done before. And theoretically that should be America, but they fucked it up right away because they didn't free the slaves. So right off the bat, the concept of America was just broken. They said, you know, freedom for everybody except for these guys because we still need this free labor in order to make enough money to maintain our independence to make this theoretical nation work. So the entire ability for America to happen was built on the back of slave labor. And so my family being able to exist through all of that was because of slave labor. And it took a really long time before my mom found out who her real father was. You know, she had never, I'm pointing back because he lives here now. He doesn't know who he is, or he knows his name, but he doesn't know anything. He couldn't tell you anything about his past. No idea who I am. You know, I've only met him 5 or 6 years ago, deep into his dimension. Everyone he's ever known or loved was already dead when my mom found him. So she basically learned about him through what she found at his house. And she eventually discovered that, yeah, one of his descendants, or one of the people he's descended from, owned slaves. So that means I'm descended of slave owners. And that means that I couldn't exist at all if not for the fact that somewhere along the line, someone said, I'm going to make my shit work by enslaving other people to make them do it for me. So that's why I feel like, well, okay, my entire existence owes to, you know, this trauma that was inflicted on an entire generation of people, many of whom, all of whom, are still feeling the ramifications of that today. And I'm still enjoying the benefits of not having been descended of slaves today because of the fact that my dad had, by his own description, had accelerated opportunities based on being white. My dad was a part of instituting DEI programs into the car sales business because of the fact that he felt personally that the people in charge had promoted him over people who were more deserving because he was white and they weren't. And he didn't like that. So he became a part of trying to make them change that. Now, ultimately, the group that he worked for, you know, when he started making those decisions, eventually canned him and eventually just started making their, you know, they continued to be very white, a certain type of white, much smaller hat than mine. But, you know, of which I also have descendancy from. So my dad's real dad, whom he never knew, Never even got to meet before he died, although he is now friends with his last wife, who is a South African woman. Um, and his real dad was directly descended from a pair of Ukrainian Jews who fled from the Ukraine to the US during World War II. So, and he ultimately became an actor. And when he bailed on his 4 children in San Diego, he went to South Africa and became an actor. Not very successful, but he was in some movies. Ultimately, my dad's mom remarried with a white Christian man who did raise my dad with some sense of discipline, but he died when my dad was like 30. I'd only met the guy like twice. So this is why I don't feel very much connection to any heritage. Like pretty much just my mom's mom is the only descendant I really know. Now her father was a bastardly landowner out in Hillsville, Virginia, who, sat on a huge plot of land and was a mean motherfucker who ran shit around town. And when his daughter got pregnant before she was 18, he completely disowned her. So my grandma and her husband moved to Newport News to work in the shipyards, had 4 kids, then she had 2 kids with 2 different other men before that guy left, leaving my mom to grow up with a revolving door of random men that her mom was sleeping with for money. This is why I have no love for white people. White people betray their own. White people have no sense of sentimentality or community. They feel as though they are on top, and that if anything starts to infect them, they have to cut it off. They're trying to maintain their shape, but like they keep literally delimbing themselves, like cutting their own family off from themselves and telling themselves it's keeping them beautiful. This is why I cannot stand white people. And I'm a part of the problem. I know if I had ever been closer with my cousin, maybe he wouldn't have set himself on fire. I've already told that story in a few other videos. Obviously, I feel some guilt about that. And I do think it's some white people shit, not checking in with your cousins. It truly is some white people shit. So I'll get into why I think white guilt is so hard for white people to accept. Most of it is just like already feeling, guilty about enough things in their own life, not wanting to have to stack something they can't even totally process on top of that they feel like, this is something that my ancestors did. Obviously, I would never do this, but it's more like the lack of solidarity that bothers me. That white people will hear about this and feel like that guilt is supposed to take them farther away from black people, as opposed to bringing them close. You should feel that and then be like, oh shit, what can I do? I can find a sense of purpose in trying to avenge a guilt. If my existence is wrong in some way, but there's something I can do about it, then that's an opportunity, in my mind, especially if it's going to build bridges to another community. How do we make this right? What reparations are being even asked for? It's mostly money, obviously. It's very easy for the government to take care of this problem. It would be very easy for the United States government to take a bunch of money from a few billionaires and just give it to every slave descendant in America until all of them were financially secure for the next, let's say, how many generations has it been since slavery? That's how many generations are owed back. So we protect this very small percentage of the population. Native Americans also get reparations. Very small percentage of the population. Would not cost that much money to take care of them for 7 or 8, 10 generations, however many generations we need. It's just a few billionaires could pay for it. But white people are so hung up in their fucking weird brains thinking that they're gonna be a billionaire one day. You have no idea how useless that is. you can't just like buy a public works project. You have to be a part of the board of people that approves the public works project. We get the money from wherever the fuck we get it from. Like the government gets to decide how the money goes around. Right now, the government is being paid for by billionaires. The billionaires are running the government instead of the government running the billionaires, which is the way it should work, because the government is of the people, by the people, for the people, and billionaires are for by themselves. Take that money, give it to the real Americans, the people who built America on the back of not even being paid, of having most of their people wiped out. Let me take this from a feminist perspective, because further down the line, maybe women can get reparation too. But think of, Native Americans and African Americans as like America's wife that the whole time has been making it all possible, but has been ignored and battered and told no. Women on a household level, a circumstance where they feel as though they're always in a losing battle. And I'm not blaming women for this. I'm saying that the men put women into this situation. But because of the fact that women are in that headspace, they're thinking, well, I'm already a victim, And they're seeing that, like, well, some black people have more money than I do. Well, some, Native Americans are running casinos and taking all this money from white people and turning them into, slave junkies to their reverse system or whatever the fuck these women are thinking. You still are in a nicer house than most people who are in those communities from no fault of their own. You still had a better education than most of those people through no fault of their own. You still had more opportunities. Yes, you're a victim. We're all victims. We're all victims under capitalism. Wow, there's a quote for you. We're all victims under capitalism. But if you live in a victim mentality, it will get worse. It will get worse for you. You need to live in a hero mentality. You need to say, if someone's even worse than I am, what can I do to make them stronger? Because they will then be able to help make me stronger. When we both together have enough strength to stand together, we have enough force to take out somebody who seems stronger than us, or to sway the opinions of other strong people who can come and help us with this situation. There's so much power in numbers, even just two. Basically what I'm saying is that my brand of trans inclusionary radical feminism necessitates reparations for the real Americans or the real Africans, however you want to identify yourself. I'm just saying the people who built America, the people who deserve America more than white people do. And I love America. I explore America with adamant freedom, and it scares everybody around me because I'm a trans woman. But I am just willing to fight a lot harder than most people who are in my position. I have a level of mental fortitude. Again, I'm descended from the psychopaths that built this country. So I've got a certain level of like insanity that can propel me through this system. A lot of people just haven't, their bloodline hasn't granted them access to that psychopathy yet, If you're white, you probably have like an inbuilt pretentious elitism, a inbuilt sense of self-worth and deservement that that you're just allowed to take and have things, and you should take and have those. You should use all that to be a Robin Hood, basically. If the more of it, if you're taking it and you're just keeping it for yourself, that's just white supremacy continuing, or if you just give it back into white institutions, or you only pay attention to white institutions. If you don't have any like favorite things that you've ever contributed to that weren't white, then you're a white supremacist. I feel white guilt in that, like, I'm on a platform that won't let me say I have to censor that, you know? I hate Twitter so much. I'm trying to get everybody off of there. Blue Sky lets me say great website. Twitter won't even let me say cisgendered or I don't know. I'm gonna bleep all these on YouTube, but I hate that I'm making money for these platforms that, you know, won't let me call white people out for their white supremacy, whereas and everybody else is easily victimized. Trans people easily victimized on these platforms. Blue Sky removed Jesse Single. Blue Sky removed the quartering the second he showed up. It took a long time to get rid of JS, but you know, there's hope. There's hope for the idea of a platform that's going to say, like, nah, you're just not allowed. You're not allowed to say that here. But you can say, crap. I like that. Swing the tide that way, white people. Blame yourselves, but don't hate yourselves. Find a reason to love yourself by finding a way to give back. I have been Trixie the Golden Witch. That's the link tree.